Good afternoon. In the past few minutes, the Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, has said the building industry will pick up the bill to fix dangerous cladding in the wake of the Grenfell disaster. At the moment, many leaseholders are facing huge costs to make their homes safe. But in the last half an hour, Mr Gove told the Commons the government was adopting a new hardline approach. Well, the plans are expected to cost around £4 billion and would see builders cover the cost instead of leaseholders. This would be in addition to the government's commitment of around £5 billion for repairs so far. It would include buildings between 11 and 18 metres tall, which have so far not been eligible for government support to remove unsafe cladding.
To those who missold dangerous products like cladding or insulation, to those who cut corners to save cash as they developed or refurbished people's homes, and to those who sought to profiteer from the consequences of the Grenfell tragedy, we are coming for you. We will change grant funding guidance so that shared owners affected by this crisis can more easily sublet their properties and encourage lenders and landlords to approve subletting arrangements. And in the period before long-term arrangements are put in place, I will work with colleagues across government to make sure leaseholders are protected from forfeiture and eviction because of historic costs. Innocent leaseholders must not shoulder the burden. We've already committed £5.1 billion of taxpayers' funding from this government, but we should not now look to the taxpayer for more funding. We should not ask hard-working taxpayers to pay more taxes to get developers and cladding companies making vast profits off the hook. We'll make industry pay to fix all of the remaining problems and to help to cover the range of costs facing leaseholders. Those who manufactured combustible cladding and insulation, many of whom have made vast profits even at the height of the pandemic, they must pay now instead of leaseholders. We've made a start through the residential property developer tax and the building safety levy, both announced last February, but will now go further. I will today be writing to developers to convene a meeting over the next few weeks, and I'll report back to the House before Easter. We will give them the chance to do the right thing.
Well, the cost of this scandal running into billions. Mr Gove saying he wants to take the burden from leaseholders to developers. Let's speak to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, who was watching that statement and the questions that Mr Gove took in the Commons a few moments ago. And John, Mr Gove very direct, saying to those developers who are not cooperating, we are coming for you.
That's right. Tough words from Mr Gove. We're coming for you. He talked about putting on notice those who knowingly put lives at risk. They should be held to account for their crimes. So this is quite a significant U-turn by the government. Following Mr Gove's appointment as what's now called the Levelling Up Secretary, previously he was known as Housing Secretary, his predecessor, Robert Jenrick, who was seen by many MPs as to being a bit too cosy and a bit too pally with big developers, many of whom were donors to the Conservative Party, had come up with a scheme that was widely regarded as pretty inadequate. So Mr Gove, pretty well acknowledged to be a problem solver, a fixer of difficult problems for the government, has come up with this plan. He did talk about giving some government money, but of course he said that the government wasn't going to write a blank cheque. And he talked about pushing developers to take their responsibility for safety defects. Now, it got a pretty warm welcome inside Parliament. The chamber was pretty full, actually, on both the Conservative and Labour side. There are those in local government who have said that this is not adequate, but in terms of fixing this problem, Mr Gove has gone some way towards doing it. He did have to get some money from the Treasury. He's done that, but also it's a 3-month scheme. 3 months rather to get the proposals up and running. He's given the industry a deadline of early March for fully funded plan of action. And he said he'll take all steps necessary to make it happen, including imposing a solution in law, in other words, legislating. And he has said that there will be further measures to protect leaseholders as well. So the government will be relieved that they have gone some way to solving this. There will be those who say it's not enough, but for now, Mr Gove is talking about homes being a source of security and pride for too many of the people people living in properties the building industry has built. Their home has become a source of misery. This must change. So Mr Gove has got tough with rogue developers. He's provided some taxpayers' money, but he is saying he's putting some of them on notice, and to use his words, we are coming for you.
OK, John, thank you. Well, let's get an idea of how those affected by this cladding scandal are feeling after Mr Gove's statement to the House of Commons. Joining me now from Manchester, Giles, who is a leaseholder in a building with dangerous cladding, ACM cladding, in fact, the same cladding that was on the Grenfell Tower. Giles, good to see you this afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
You'll have been listening with some degree of interest. This is, a vested interest for you in what Mr Gove had to say to the Commons. Tough talk from him. What did you think?
Tough talk, tough words, but we have kind of been here before in terms of the right things being said in Parliament over the last few years about industry doing the right thing, about there being $5 billion cladding scandal have ended. We still need a lot more. So we have thanked Mr Gove. We met him early this morning and said we welcome the fact that he looks like he's getting a grip on this crisis, but there's still some way to go, essentially.
So you met with him earlier, so you got a preview as to what he was going to tell the Commons and the action he was taking. He has set out a timeline, which I'm sure will be encouraging, because, as you know, with a lot of things from government, when they talk about reports, there is no timeline, there is no deadline for them to report back. He said early March for a fully funded plan of action with developers that come to the table, and possible action thereafter. And Michael Gove will report himself back to the House before Easter. When you spoke to him, what more did you say you needed?
So part of the issue is, as he kind of recognised today in the Commons, is there's cladding, which is part of the problem, but a lot of the problem is also the non-cladding issues, and those are more serious, and particularly in those buildings below 18 metres. So ultimately, what we've always said is that they need to ensure that there's clarity around risk assessment in all buildings of all heights, whether it's under 80 metres, even under 11 metres, who've been ruled out so far from any help. Then we can actually have an idea about the quantum of the problem and the costs required to fix it. Then we've got issues like the waking watch, the interim measures, the insurance. So there's still a way to go. But as I say, in the last 4 months, he's probably got a lot further than his predecessor did in a couple of years. So we've still got a lot of faith in him, but as I say, still cautious, still very cautious.
Yeah, Giles, and he did make some reference to that in his statement and in the questions that he was asked in the Commons a few moments ago. And like he said, cladding gets all of the attention, but it's things like fireproof doors, it's things like wooden balconies, fire alarms. There's so much that goes into a building that may be unsafe, and like you said, that may be slipping through the cracks. Can you talk to us about your personal experience? How has this affected you? Talk to me about the building that you've been living in, or that you are a leaseholder of.
Yeah, sure. So we first found out we had the same cladding ACM as that was on Grenfell Tower tragedy. We found that out in July 2017. So the best part of 5 years, I've known that my home has been unsafe. Unfortunately, the government issued advice notes for the right reasons in terms of ensuring buildings were now made safe, despite not really considering that for 30 years. We then found even more and more problems. So ultimately, in July 2019, we were then told it would be £11 million between about 330 leaseholders, so £40,000 each to fix. So we've made applications to fund both funds that have taken a year and a half to get the money out. The project started in April. We've had scaffolding go up, told it to finish in February. Unfortunately, they've uncovered more problems since they started taking the cladding off. So we've still got a range of issues that we're still having to fork out for. And that's one of the things we're quite worried about, that we've paid over money now. Will we get that back at any time, or is this the end of Mr Gove's and the Chancellor's offering?
Yeah, Giles, as you said, it makes reference to, as you take the cladding off, you scratch beneath the surface and there are more problems. In terms of the financial cost, that has been huge for you as a leaseholder, because, we talk about insurance going up. We talk about you having to foot higher service charges. Some buildings are having fire wardens having to stay watch over the building overnight, and that costs money. But the emotional cost, the cost to your life, what has that been like for the last 5 years?
Yeah, it's something that you think of, that the finances are important, but then the mental health aspect, which often gets forgotten about, that you're thinking about it all day. You don't know if your home's safe, but that's the last thing you think of at night. You'll dream about it, about cladding, about non-cladding, about how we're going to find money. So we just can't escape. It was even worse during the pandemic as well, when we were trapped inside our flats and for 23 hours a day, knowing that we were so unsafe. So there's people from all ranges, all walks of life, all ages who are similarly affected. So that's one thing we really focus on. But Mr. Gove needs to sort out the finances, and then we'll actually be able to move on with our lives. Right now we're in limbo, but we're hopeful we'll get somewhere over the coming months.
OK, well, Giles Glover, we wish you well. Thank you so much for talking to us and reacting to that statement delivered by the Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, in the Commons a few moments ago. Thank you very much. I'm sure we will speak again. As you said, this story is far from over.